I was born from a family that once stood close to the throne. The word once is the heaviest word in the Korean language. My grandfather chose the wrong side of history, or perhaps the right one. Either way, we were erased. I grew up in Asan, far from power, learning that the world that betrays you is still the world worth defending. His name was Chilcheollyang. He was 3 years older and twice as loud. While I arranged the battle formation from fallen branches, he was already laughing at the result. We were children playing war in a courtyard in Asan. Neither of us knew that one day the game would become real, and the whole country would depend on whether we played it well. August 1572. I was 28 years old. The military exam, Mugwa. My horse lost control at full gallop. I hit the ground hard enough to break my left leg. The crowd went silent. Any other man would have stopped. I found a willow branch, bound my leg with torn cloth, remounted, and finished the exam. There is a difference between an honorable excuse and the right decision. I bound my broken leg with the branch of a willow tree. Every pull of the knot felt like fire poured into the bone. The willow bends in the storm, but its roots remain. That is what I would become. I got back on the horse. I finished the exam. I did not pass that year. The accident tore away too much time from my score. But I found something under that willow tree in dry August, something not found in any book. Pain is data, not a conclusion. 4 years later, in 1576, I returned and passed. At 32, I was the oldest new officer, with a shoulder that would never fully be the same. The willow bends in the storm, but its roots remain. That is what I will become. In 1591, Joseon, my childhood friend who found his way to the peak of bureaucracy, recommended my name to command the naval station. I spent a year rebuilding from nothing. And with Na Dae-yong, an engineer with honest hands, we resurrected an old, forgotten design. April 1592. The Japanese fleet landed in Busan. 3 weeks later, Myeongnyang fell. A 200-year dynasty collapsed in less time than it takes a farmer to finish his harvest.
Sun-sin, you are the only one I compromised my heart for when recommending you. I know they will envy you. But in all of Joseon, there is only one man I trust to guard this sea, and that is you.
While the king ran, I went to sea. Okpo, Sacheon, Dangpo. At Sacheon, an arquebus bullet shattered my left shoulder. Away from the crew, I used a knife to dig the lead out myself. The pain was the most honest thing I had felt since breaking my leg in the arena. At Hansando, we crushed Wakizaka Yasuharu. They feared the sea because the sea was mine. But there is an old law. The brighter your light, the darker the shadow you cast on the walls of the palace. The victories were mirrors, and an honest mirror is a king's most dangerous enemy. There is a price never taught to any soldier. The price of winning too often, too undeniably, and being loved too deeply by a people who should first love their king. After Hansando, my name moved faster than our fastest ship. Fishermen spoke it on the beaches. Refugees spoke it in their prayers. Even children in villages who had never seen the sea knew there was someone in the south keeping the Japanese from coming by water. I never asked for that. I only worked.
The people speak his name, not mine. The ministers bring reports of his victories, not mine. If he decides one day that the king who fled to Uiju is no longer fit for the throne he defended with his own blood, who will stop him? Who will side with me?
In the king's anxiety, Wang Gyun found his ground. Wang Gyun, an older naval commander, supposed to be senior, whose panic at the start of the invasion made him scuttle his own ships rather than fight, had long harbored a wound that no one else's victory could heal. I had recorded no less than 30 incidents of his dishonesty and misconduct in my diary. 30. Falsified military reports, stolen credit for victories from my unit, barbaric treatment of prisoners, drunkenness on ship while soldiers stood guard. In my diary, I called him a devil. But a cunning devil always knows where heaven is most vulnerable.
Yi Sun-sin did not attack when ordered. He chooses for himself when to fight and when to wait. Is that what we call obedience to the king? Or is that a general who has begun to feel larger than the crown he serves? Honorable General Kim, Kato Kiyomasa will move through the eastern waters in a few days. If Admiral Yi is sent now to the point I show you, this war could end with one strike. Isn't that what everyone wants? A quick victory, a clear hero, and a king who can thank the right person.
The information was beautiful. Too beautiful. I knew the waters Yoshira pointed to. I had charted them, measured the currents, calculated the depths of the trenches beneath the calm surface. The hidden reefs there are invisible from above, but sharp enough to rip a Panoxion hull in minutes. If I took the fleet there, the intact Joseon fleet, all that was left of years of work, and the Japanese were waiting on the surrounding cliffs, no one would return. I refused the order, not because I was a coward, not because I didn't want to fight, but because I knew the difference between bravery and stupidity, and I would not kill 30,000 soldiers for intelligence that smelled too sweet to be real. That refusal was the last word they needed. Wang Gyun had long prepared his reports. The Western faction at court had long waited for an opening. King Sonjo had long looked for a reason to believe his suspicions were right. Those three forces met in one moment like three rivers flowing into the same estuary. And at that estuary, what waited was not the sea, but a trap. Charges were sent to the palace, insubordination, treason, arrogance unbecoming of a subject. King Sonjo ordered my arrest. The journey from Jola to Hanyang, inside a wooden cage. I did not count the days. Time felt different in there. Not slower, not faster, just flatter. No horizon to measure, no stars for navigation, only wooden bars on all sides and the ground of Korea shaking beneath the cartwheels. At every village we passed through, people stood at the roadside. Some of them knew who was inside this cage. They did not jeer, as royal punishment processions are expected to receive. They were silent. Some knelt. An old woman threw a small packet of rice through the bars. No one stopped her, not even the guards.
이에 거사를 일으켜 사자목 과준폰이 공라되었시다.
They called it an
국가를
examination.
위기에서 구하려 하였다.
Clean language for something unclean. I did not invent answers, not because I am stronger than pain. No man is stronger than pain given enough time. But because inside that wooden cage, long before arriving here,
I have nothing
had
more to
already
say.
decided. The only thing they cannot take from me is consistency between what I
나는
did and what I
백성들의
say.
목소리를 대변하는 것뿐이다.
Then the news came. My mother, the woman who sent me to the archery field with more provisions than I ever asked for, who nursed me through fever at the northern post, who never once told me that my choice to become a soldier was a burden to her, heard news of my arrest from a passing officer. The shock was too great for an old body. She died before I could leave Uigeumbu.
이만하면
Someone came with a way out. A broker, a man who never gave his name, representing a party he never named, arrived one night with an offer wrapped in the language of concern. Some gold, some connections in the right faction. A small statement, he said, just enough to give the king face. I asked him to leave. Buying freedom with a lie means walking out of this stone prison into a smaller one, with no walls, invisible to everyone except myself. They reduced my rank to common soldier. The title gone, the command gone. Wang Gyun now holds the fleet I built, the ships I maintained, the soldiers I trained. The Geobukseon that Na De-yong and I created from sketches and sweat and sleepless nights at the Jeolla yard. I walked out of Uigeumbu as a soldier without rank, my left shoulder still lower than the right. Some things no royal decree can take.
Yi Sun-sin is always too cautious. Too much calculating, too much waiting. That is the difference between him and me. I am not afraid to fight. The intelligence is valid. Kato Kiyomasa is there. We attack tonight. We end this war tonight. And history will record who was truly brave.
Wang Gyun ordered the fleet into Chilcheollyang on the night of August 27, 1597. The intelligence he followed belonged to Yoshira. But Wang Gyun was not me. He never bothered to study the underwater maps. He never spent his nights measuring currents and calculating reefs. He believed in his courage, his numbers, and the flattering voices of court. That is exactly what the Japanese needed from an enemy commander confidence built not on knowledge. The first minute of the attack, fire erupted from the cliff, simultaneously hundreds of points of light turning into a rain of flaming arrows. They knew the position of every Hussein ship before the battle even began. It was not a battle, it was a planned slaughter.
Lower the small boats! Lower them! I command you! Who dares ignore my orders? The sea! Where are they coming from? Where are they coming from?
Wang Gyun abandoned his ship before his men. He swam to the shore and hid in the bushes. Found by Japanese soldiers combing the banks. Killed. They're not on the deck with a sword in hand, but hiding like a cornered animal. History does not always give a death equal to one's sins. But for one Yun, that death felt like a definition. From the 200 ships I built, the ships Noryang and the carpenters of Chilcheollyang labored over for years, filled with soldiers trained to an uncompromising standard. 188 vanished in a single night. 12 survived, scattered across the southern waters.
The sea that night was red. Not red like a sunset. Red like there was too much blood for the water to absorb. I swam through the wreckage of our fleet. On every side there were bodies. I didn't know which way to swim, because there was no side without fire.
I heard the news of Chilcheollyang from an officer on a horse near death from exhaustion. He recited the numbers one by one. Inside my head, a voice wanted to scream. Not at one Yun, or the king, or Yoshira, but because I already knew this would happen. I knew it, and I couldn't stop it. That is the burden without a rank. The burden of a man who sees a disaster coming from afar, but is given no key to lock the door. Joseon no longer had a navy. Only 12 scattered ships, traumatized soldiers, and a court considering abolishing the navy entirely to surrender the sea to the enemy. And somewhere within that impending decision, a decision that would change the rest of his life, a former admiral, now a common soldier, was counting. Not the ships that were lost, but the ships that remained. 12. It is enough. After Chilcheollyang, the king called me back. Not because he was regretful, not because there was an apology hidden behind the order, but because after the fleet was annihilated and one Gyun died hiding in the coastal bushes, there was no other name left for him to write on the naval command order. Sometimes fate brings a man back, not because he is wanted, but because he is the only one left. I accepted the order, not because my king deserved it, not because I forgot the chains, or the Uigiumbu prison, or my mother who died alone while I could not be there. I accepted it because beyond all of that, there were still 12 ships waiting, and soldiers who needed to return home. I do not belong to the king. I have never belonged to the king. I belong to the sea that must be protected, and the people who live on its shores. The news came from a cavalry officer on a windy afternoon. Myeongnyang, my youngest son, 21 years old, who enlisted because he refused to sit idle while his father fought, was killed in a land battle near Asan. He died with a sword in his hand. That is what they told me. I do not know if it is the truth or a kindness they offered to a father. I did not weep in front of anyone. I waited until night, until my tent was quiet, until no one could see that the pillar of the Joseon Navy was sitting on the dirt floor, holding back something too massive to be named. Myeongnyang was born in the spring. He smelled like the first rain after a long drought. I heard the news that Myeongnyang has died in battle. My chest is shattered. I wept all night. How can heaven be so cruel? What sin have I committed that the punishment must fall upon my son, and not me?
With the remaining fleet being insufficient for meaningful battle, His Majesty is considering the dissolution of the naval unit and consolidating forces under the land command. Admiral Yi is requested to provide an assessment of the remaining fleet's condition.
I sat with that letter in my hand. I waited until my head was as clear as water on a windless day. Then I wrote, even though our fleet has suffered a great defeat, I, as the commander, am still alive, and I still have 12 ships. If I lead these 12 ships with all my life, the enemy will not dare to underestimate us. "12 ships. I did not write that as a promise to the king. I wrote it as a declaration to myself that a living man who still holds something in his hands has no right to surrender before it is truly gone. As long as there is something left to be done, grief must wait its turn. Myeongnyang awaits. 133 Japanese ships wait across the Uldolmok Strait. The sea that kills the enemy is the same sea. The only difference is who knows it better. I know it. I stand before Uldolmok. The roaring strait screams, a beast of water and jagged stone. Yet, on my deck, my men are utterly silent. 13 ships. That is all we have left to hold the nation's throat. They call it madness to face an armada with splinters, but they do not understand the sea. The sea does not count ships. It only measures resolve. And today, our resolve is iron.
Look at them. 13 broken ships against the might of the rising sun. A pathetic wall of rotting wood. We do not guard this strait. We're simply waiting to die. They think the narrow waters will save them. They are fools! Our numbers will blot out the sea! Sound the horns! Beat the drums! We will crush every last splinter of their fleet!
They mistake our silence for fear. Let them push deep into the narrow waters. Let them crowd the choke point until their oars tangle. Wait until their armored hulls fill our sights. Let them see the cold bronze of our cannons. Steady, do not blink. Now, let the iron speak.
Grapple their hulls! Swarm their decks! Their cannons cannot save them from our blades! Rip them apart and bring me his head!
the shield wall, break their momentum. The enemy relies on panic. Ugh. But we are a mountain. Do not yield a single inch of wood. Bleed them on the edge of our swords. The tide obeys no emperor. Uldolmok awakens. The waters turn, ripping open the sea, transforming the narrow passage into a violent meat grinder. Their massive fleet is no longer an armada. It is debris caught in a grinder of our making. Ships built for speed are crushed by the sheer weight of the ocean. They thought they were fighting 13 ships. They were wrong. Today, the sea itself claims those who dare disrespect it. Those who seek death shall live. Those who seek life shall die. Today, the waters of Uldolmok bleed red, but our shores remain untouched. The mountain stands.
The sea. The sea itself fights for him. It's impossible.
December 1598. Hideyoshi had been dead since September, dying in Kyoto after his dream of conquering Asia collapsed under a cost he never properly calculated. Without Hideyoshi, the Japanese daimyos had no reason to hold the Korean peninsula, which had drained their blood and gold for 6 years. They were withdrawing. But retreating does not mean peace. The Japanese armada was still sailing home in battle formation, a massive convoy bringing the remaining troops back from the southern coast, passing through the Noryang Strait. And as long as they were in Korean waters, as long as a single one of their ships could touch our shores, my work was not done. I did not know that night that this would be my final battle. Or perhaps I did, and simply chose not to give that knowledge more room than it deserved. The bullet came from an angle I did not anticipate, not from the ship we were attacking. From the side, a stray shot sweeping across our deck amidst the thick smoke of battle. A single arquebus bullet, an unusual trajectory. It pierced the gap between the shoulder and chest on my left side, the armpit. The one place armor can never perfectly protect, because that is the hinge, the space that must move freely so the arm can raise a sword. The sea felt tilted, not because of the waves, because something hot and heavy was slowly extinguishing something else inside my chest. with a precision that almost felt deliberate. I did not fall immediately. I refused to let myself fall. The battle was still raging. There were soldiers still looking toward the flagship to ensure the drum was still beating, that there was still command, still a reason to push forward and never turn back. I held onto the ship's railing. Yi Wan, my nephew, a young man whose face was not yet old enough to perfectly hide his panic, was already at my side. He saw the blood. He saw where the bullet had entered. His eyes asked a question he dared not voice. The battle is at its peak. Do not announce my death. Keep beating the drum.
What a goodie. Yi Sun-sin was a Dryal soldier, even if he sometimes made beyond his authority. Let us pray for his whole, grant him an appropriate posterity title. Now, let us discuss the reconstruction of Hanyang.
There were no tears in the palace. There was a posthumous title, Chung Mugong, the loyal martial lord, granted some time later, only after enough ministers insisted that withholding it would look terrible historically. But on the night of his death, aboard a ship still reeking of gunpowder, blood, and winter sea salt, the only one weeping was Yi Wan, a nephew forced to be the greatest actor of his life in his darkest moment, who could only weep once the battle was truly over, when there was no longer a reason to pretend the drum wasn't being beaten by the wrong hands. He left behind no wealth, no lands, no hereditary titles, an admiral who never lost a naval battle, a man who never sold his truth, even when the price was everything, a soldier whose final order was not about victory, but about continuity, about ensuring that what they fought for would not stop just because one man was gone. Keep beating the drum.